Welcome to TONIC Experience. My name's Darren Kramer. This week's guest is jazz trumpeter Gabriel Mervine. Gabe is a wine enthusiast, so that's our tonic of the day. I'm drinking Old Soul. He's going to share some different wines that he likes. And in case you're new to the show, this is what TONIC is all about. Basically feeling good and being in the moment and doing the things you love. Thanks for being here. So everybody, please welcome Gabe Mervine, chiming in from downtown Denver.
Yes, sir.
I'm north. I'm up by Westminster, so we're about 12 miles apart.
Yeah.
But awesome you're here. Thanks for spending the time.
No, it's nice to be here and nice to be collaborating on some music and just collaborating in conversation too.
Yeah. So let's welcome everyone. We decided to go with red wine today for TONIC. So here's to you.
Cheers. Clink.
Yeah, I should probably get some sound effects.
I was just thinking that.
So what are you drinking then?
Well, right now I'm drinking this nice Tempranillo. I actually have a friend over at Appaloosa, and I work there. It's a bar downtown, quite a bit playing music. And he, at the beginning of quarantine, kind of sent me a list of, actually I asked him, I said, can you send me all the affordable bottles, like under $20 that you really like? And he sent me a list of like 11 different bottles, all under $15. So
Great.
I went to Applejack and I bought one of each. And so I've been doing a lot of sampling. Some of my favorites were this H3 Cabernet.
Hold it up closer. H3
Like I
Cab,
said,
okay.
all under $15. I've been really enjoying that. But also, not to go into too deep into it, but I also, during this quarantine, I've stopped by Nocturne a couple times. And this has been my favorite from there, this little Grenache. And
Nice.
Scott and Nicole are really well versed on good wines, and so I've been going in there. And the third source of my liquor consumption this quarantine has been from Dirty and Rowdy Wines, which trumpeter Eric Bloom from Benny and Zoida's Selections runs this little thing, and it was actually pretty cool. We did I did a Zoom call just like this, but it was a virtual wine tasting with live music. And so everyone's at their respective homes, and one person plays some music, another person talks about wine and where it's from and different grapes. And so I've been kind of digging on the red wine this last couple months.
It's an awesome thing, isn't it? And what is it? Like diving right in, we're going to get to some really cool music that we just played together yesterday for my Funky Friday. And we'll talk about that and a little bit about freelance life, being a freelance jazz musician, what that entails, and now this new kind of twist that's happened in the last 3 months. But since we're on the wine thing, yeah, so what is it? When I asked Gabe, what did he want to talk about with what drink this week? And he said pretty much he's only doing wine and tequila these days. So what is it about wine that you actually really love?
I mean, there's a number of things. One is just how smooth it is. And I like being able to like drink something slowly and have it remain equally as delicious. You know, when a beer is changing temperature, sometimes I don't enjoy the flavor as much when it's room temp as when I first started drinking it. Wine seems to remain good like for a whole set as I visit and come back, and kind of same thing with tequila. And prior to that, I was really into different scotches. Yeah. Same thing. You can kind of just let it sit, drink it at your own pace. Scotch, tequila, wine. Also, I can like throw the cork back in or put a little sealer on it or whatever those are called, and then come back to it the next day. I don't want to waste anything, and it's nice to be able to open up a bottle, have a little bit, cork it, and then resume the next day without feeling the pressure to finish a whole bottle.
So right,
In the night.
I agree 100%. That's the big thing about whiskeys and just drinking stuff straight, that room temperature. It's always the same, and there's no ice either to dilute it. So every time you take a sip, it's like just like it was. In fact, I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, and like I said, for people like us, I also think we're in the brass family. I've even like my friend Maddie from Appaloosa, we've even talked about like, because some wines you drink and they like dry you out, and then you want that juicy steak or whatever pairs well with it. But for me, a lot of the time I'm drinking like, during a set, having a sip here and a sip there. And so like, I want something that's like more fruit forward, a little more sweet to keep my like enough saliva to keep playing, So I've even like, there's music and wine pairings for sure. It's not just food and wine.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. And do you find, what about the flavor, or because some people with coffee or with beer, IPA beers and stuff, they just don't like the overall flavor. And I did a sonic tonic on that. The bass is the bass, meaning the bass is the most important instrument in any band, and really the main ingredient is the most important and the most forward, right? So if you actually don't like grapes or you don't like an alcohol taste, you're probably not going to like wine.
Yeah.
But what do you like about it? The actual flavor, the details of it.
Yeah, I mean, I like things that are a little bit sweet and a little bit tart. And that like totally describes a lot of what, some like Pinot Noir wine that I drink. And also kind of, talking about like Scotch or tequila too. I mean, it's a totally different flavor profile, but also it's like there's a sweetness there, but it's not too sweet. That's why when you asked me about doing the sonic tonic thing, I was like, oh man, when was the last time I ordered a cocktail, like a mixed drink? Because I'm not like a sweets guy, really. Like I kind of like an intense flavor. Like you brought up coffee, and I'm an espresso guy. I like that, like, well, gritty.
Yeah, man. Grit and pungent, right? I mean, and strong. It's kind of aggressive, but then after you swallow it, then there's all these subtle things that kind of take shape, and each bottle or each brand is slightly different, which is cool, right?
Yeah, and I love like the couple people I talked about, like, talking wine at Nocturne or at Appaloosa or with Eric Bloom, and they're as passionate about wine as we get about music, and I mean that's something that excites me in life, regardless of what someone's talking about. Sometimes even if I have no idea. Like one of my old roommates was a mechanical engineer, did really crazy engineering stuff, and we used to hang, and I would try and describe music theory to him, and he's just, and then he's trying to describe engineering, the mathematical problems he's doing, pages and pages and pages of notes, very few numbers on there, and I'm so confused. But I'm also really just enjoying the fact that someone's like so passionate about something, kind of regardless of what it is,
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, because all of this jazz community in Colorado here, it's pretty tight knit, very cool. And it makes me think of, Sam Williams, our friend, sax player. He's a real coffee aficionado, and he imports beans and then actually roasts them. And I know you were talking about doing that. Have you actually roasted yet?
I've been trying.
You got them in your little toaster?
I'm looking over in my kitchen right now because I actually bought this little, like, when you smoke or when you roast coffee beans, the amount of smoke that comes out of them is like, so for about 3 weeks I was doing it in my kitchen. I'd have to unplug all the fire alarms or smoke detectors, sorry, and do this, and my whole place would be like this murky, smoky mess for like the half of the day, And then I was reading these articles about how like actually that smoke isn't that good to inhale. So I bought this little outdoor basically like a one stove unit or whatever that's electrical. And I've been roasting them in my backyard, just in a pan. I turn them, and like, it's a fun activity to kind of mess around with. And you're right. Yeah, I just like import them. I like buy them online. They show up at my doorstep, and it's like crazy how inexpensive these like really nice beans are. And it's kind of a fun process to mess around with, especially with some of the free time, especially when this quarantine first started. It was like, there's nothing going on. There's nothing to do. So what can we do to pass the time? Garden, clean. I'm not going to do that. So
I mean, let's not be ridiculous.
Yeah. So yeah, I rearranged the furniture. No. So yeah, I've kind of been messing around with roasting some coffee beans.
That's awesome, man. I mean, there's so many correlations between, that's why I started the Sonic Tonic, is thinking all these details and sort of passions and going deeper about coffee or wine or food. You know, my sister Dawn, great trumpet player, and she's way into cooking, and everything she cooks.
Amazing.
Awesome. Yes, you've had
so
it, right?
Good. So good.
The desserts, but also she just, made like different soups recently, and any breakfast thing she makes. It's just all incredible. And I think being a musician and detail oriented, it carries over into other areas of your life. So I think that's why music education is important.
It totally, that's a great point, and I think about that a lot actually, and how, whatever you want to call it, attention to detail, obsessive compulsive, whatever you fall on that spectrum. But yes, you're totally correct. The ability to kind of hopefully just temporarily put the blinders on and really focus on a single activity or a single scale or a single piece of music or a single recipe or whatever it might be is kind of what drew us to the arts in the first place, and what makes that commonality between like cooking and any kind of these detail oriented studies. It's like, when we're into something, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and there's a lot of power in that too, because you discover more details about it as you go deep, which is what this is all about. So that being said, when we first started today, you were listening to a little bit of this brand new song I wrote called Cryptnotic, which is sort of this mysterious hypnotic groove that I centered this whole song around, is the kick drum and the snare. And real pure, real kind of basic, but then these subtle nuances with the rhythm of the kick drum versus the snare. And it grew into this song, and I thought, how perfect to have Gabe play on it. And so we just debuted it yesterday. And so you were listening to a little bit of that. Let's listen to this section that I really like right here for a second, and then we'll have Gabe kind of tell us what he was thinking. So here's a segment of Cryptnotic, brand new tune. Yeah. So I just love the way that sounds. There's so many fluctuations in volume and textures of sounds and everything. And so Gabe had never heard this tune. I just said, play over this thing and let's see what happens. So Gabe, tell us kind of what you're thinking, if you can recall what you were thinking when there's that sort of soft area that we first started with, and then it gets into that real kind of louder, aggressive part. What's going through your mind as a jazz musician?
You know, especially in the past couple months, learning to incorporate what we do artistically into this new huge shift of like not playing live and recording music remotely to play with people. It's something that's totally new to me. And one of the things I miss the most is like the sort of spontaneity of just like, let's go. Like you hear, play what you hear, figure it out. So when you sent me this track specifically, I can't remember what was worded in the email, but it was kind of like, just here's the key and just like go. And so I didn't do a practice run. That's not true for all the pieces I've been recording and doing. But this piece, I kind of just, I'm not even sure I remembered it, that it was A flat Phrygian or whatever. I think I just started playing along and I was just trying to picture myself like on stage at one of your gigs playing a new tune. And so I was doing my best to just keep my ears open, close my eyes and respond to what I was hearing and try and picture it in the most musical context I could.
That, I got to stop you right there. That is so spot on. That's how I think too. I mean,
cool.
Good point. We need to have a sip of wine.
Yep.
You know what I found by even doing Sonic Tonic is, as we're doing that, I was going to respond to what you were saying. And typically when you're at a party or just watching TV or something, you're doing this, you're not thinking about what you're eating or drinking either. So now when I'm on this thing and I'm talking about something, and then I say, hey, everyone, let's have a little sip. And normally I'd go, okay, so now, you know, and did I even enjoy it? So there is a thing of going, let's hold on a second, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
And go, man, that is so berry. And it's right in the middle of my tongue. It's just like super strong and feels awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that's gotten lost a little bit in the last 10 years, you know, of society. And I think it's neat for us to all to kind of go, man, what do I have right now? And can I enjoy it? Can I be grateful?
Yeah.
And what you said about, I give you a tune, which by the way, I recorded live. I mean, I created it as a living creature, and then I give it to you. And when you listen to it, whether I'm sitting next to you or you're listening to it, you could still treat it that it's happening in the moment. And if you hear a random cymbal splash, then you can respond to that. And so that's why play-alongs are still in some area, you know what, half of it is live, maybe 3/4 of it. The 25% of kind of thinking live musicians played that, and then you're half of the equation when you're playing with it, right?
Totally.
It's a neat concept, but that's why I think it's interesting to talk about, because you are thinking about that. You're not just playing randomly like, oh, I play the trumpet, let me just go. You're actually going, oh, let me listen and respond, right?
Yeah.
So if everyone's not familiar, the sound that you were hearing of the trumpet is that real Miles Davis kind of, really, he kind of created that as sort of his sound, and that's a harmon mute. And so, Gabe, why don't you just play a little bit of trumpet? Let's hear the natural trumpet sound. Play in that E major scale, G sharp Phrygian. That's what it is, basically 7 tones. Let's hear a little bit.
Yeah.
Love it, man. That's one of the things, everybody in Denver that knows Gabe, That's what we all love about your playing is I think a lot of people think trumpet is kind of this strident, loud, obnoxious instrument, and you
It can be.
and actually my sister, who we all play together quite a bit, both of you have this like real mellowness and beauty to the sound, and it depends on who's playing it. It's not the
Yeah.
instrument. So you think about that a lot.
I've really been thinking about it a lot lately too. But I always think, I can't remember who said this to me, but they said play the room. You know, every time you walk into a different acoustical setting, that becomes part of your instrument. It doesn't end here; it ends with what it's reverberating around. And so I play differently when I'm on a big band gig versus a small group jazz gig versus where we are right now, which is like picking this right now. We're just on my microphone on my phone. So if I play anything above like a mezzo forte to a even a mezzo forte could, depending on the range, override the microphone or overdrive the microphone. So I'm really trying to focus on exactly what you're talking about: sound, projection, and warmth of the tone at a quieter dynamic.
And that's honestly what I love about acoustic jazz is that, yeah, especially with great players that are real mindful of their environment, but also recording, because then it's this controlled thing where you can create this vibe. So if anyone was paying attention in that tune, when we opened up the show with, is it's like, man, there's a real nuance and vibe going on, and it's really about that reverb. We both discussed that and thought, yeah, that's a cool thing. This big kind of cavernous space that you can create. You play differently when you're hearing that. And the other sound was what I'm saying, this Miles Davis kind of typical sound that people relate to jazz trumpet, which is a Harmon mute. So Gabe, you want to show them a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. It's always nice to gain a different timbre, because it kind of makes you improvise in a different way, changes your voice a little bit, you know.
Great. Can you point like a completely different direction?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like face away from this, turn sideways, and let's hear how different that sounds. It's so interesting because I don't know if other people are hearing this, but I kind of hear more of the buzz of the mute, even when you turn sideways. So you're farther from the mic of the phone, but it's really kind of buzzing crazy. I mean, it's a cool effect.
Yeah, I've noticed that the last record I did, the record before the last one, I think it was called Things, with like Gonzalo Tepa and Eric Gunnison and Alwyn on drums. I remember noticing that we were playing some little sketch of a piece that I wrote and just kind of grooving over it to see what it might become in the studio. And I was like, wanted to come in really quietly, but I didn't know if I had the control here. So I started away from, and I was playing with the mute. I started away from the microphone and I worked my way towards the microphone. And this phase effect kind of came in where like you could hear the buzz, but not the tone. And then the tone came in and I was like, wow, another revelation. I thought about it prior to that, but you know, the microphone is part of our instrument too at that point, especially in the recording studio or playing with a funk band, a louder band. This instrument doesn't end right here. Like I said, that microphone is also part of what we do. And I'm sure you've noticed proximity matters. You get a lot of the low end of the sound when the microphone is really close to the bell. When the microphone is further away, we get a lot of those higher overtones. So depending on what kind of trumpet sound you're trying to record, or trying to play live, there's ways you can manipulate it with the microphone itself. You know, it's like, just like what were we talking about, detail oriented?
Yep. It's heavy, right? And at that point, you're thinking about the end product. This is a really cool concept. You're thinking about the end product and not so much about wait, I have to finger this note this way on the trumpet. You're not thinking about the rhythm that you're playing, although all those are happening at the same time also, which is, that's why music actually is quite complicated and difficult, and why you have to, if you really want to get to a high level of expressive creativity, you have to basically spend your life doing it, because there's all of that going on, and you're thinking about how is the sound ending up in the room, and not about, wait, I'm on the third bar of Cherokee, right? When what's the chord?
You know, I've been teaching a lot more this past, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, but definitely more the past couple months. And I explain that to young students using the analogy of, you know, studying a foreign language. You know, when their teachers talk about studying French or Spanish, they say the end goal would be to become fluent in that language, basically conveying that when I'm talking to you, I'm not having to think about every word. I'm able to think about a concept that I'm trying to explain. Each word isn't having to be solidified and figured out and ordered and conjugated in my brain before I send it to you. And I compare that to improvisation or playing our instrument. And that's why, like, the concept of playing fundamentals and playing your instrument for a certain amount of time to get to the point where you don't have to think about this anymore. You can think about the end goal, whether that's playing a great solo on Cherokee or getting the greatest sound for this track you're recording, or reaching the audience in a way. You have to be able to not think about scales and chords to do that. You know?
That's so right on, and it correlates exactly with a great bartender and a great chef. At some point, they've done it so much, they just go, hey, make me the best pumpkin bread you can. They don't go and look up their recipe. They go, oh, I'm going to do this, and then they even take that creative choice and that chance and go, but maybe I'll put this extra little spice in here that I've been experimenting with for the last 2 weeks. And all of a sudden it turns into this awesome new thing, but they weren't having to just read it. So just reading music can actually be a little bit limiting, right?
Yeah, well, and as long as we have this end goal in mind, this concept of fluidity and transcending the instrument, or transcending the notes on the page or the notes up here to becoming something more than just the sum of its parts, I guess, if that makes sense, you know?
That's so what this is about. So it's a good place to really point out, Gabe is right in downtown Denver. He's doing live lessons on Zoom, right?
Yeah, Zoom, FaceTime, whatever, you know, we're just making it work.
Make it work. And super knowledgeable guy, man. He lives, eats, and breathes trumpet and jazz. And if you're looking to kind of take the next step, get a little more knowledge about how to play jazz, how to play music, how to play trumpet, reach out to him. And what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
You know, I try and stay as active as I can on like I do Facebook and Instagram, and that's an easy way to get a hold of me. I also just have a website, gabrielmervine.com, with an easy page to send in your information, and I'll get right back to you, because this feeds my soul too. Just getting to talk music, play music, share art, and share the love of this, because it's always important, but you know, at a time like this, it's like exceedingly important to share this art form, or any art form, not just music, or not just jazz, but any kind of music. You know, I really feel like in every song there's a history lesson. In every song we study, whether it's from Charles Mingus to Beethoven to Bach, you can't help but have a history lesson enveloped in the study. Not just history, it's like culture, and everything is embedded in the history of music. So it's so cool we get to be quasi-historians just by being musicians. You know, it's all tied together. It's great.
It's a fun thing, but it's also kind of a responsibility, right? I mean, so you take it, all the musicians I know that have been doing this for 20 plus years kind of have that underwritten like mentality, this subconscious thing where it's kind of like, man, I'm only part of the whole. And you're trying to give the respect to the people that have come before you and keep the tradition while sort of creating your own take on it. And that's
Yeah.
what I think we all love about jazz, right? It's every time you play, you have that opportunity to create something new, but you're standing on the shoulders of people before you. It's so cool.
Yeah. And definitely part of what you're talking about. We have a role to look back and honor the past and the trajectory of this music, and we also have a job and a role to keep it moving forward. And sometimes that line, we go back and forth, you know. Sometimes I'm like, man, I'm playing so much of other people's music, I should be doing more of my own. And then I end up doing a bunch of my own, and I feel like I lose my roots a little bit. And the goal is to, I guess it constantly changes throughout our lives, but yeah, it's a direct connection to all this history. It's so cool.
That's Gabe Mervine in Denver playing electric trumpet on my tune, Turbulent Altercation. How many CDs do you have that you've recorded of your music?
Under my own name, I've done 4.
And people just go to GabrielMervine.com to find that too?
Yep, they're there for digital download, and you can also get a physical one if you'd like. I didn't print my latest record, but I'm planning on printing a few. But it's like, you know, I don't, the CD player is gone, you know, I don't know a lot of people with them anymore. So I'm trying to make the move to digital. And if you see me on a gig, or if you come hear me live sometime, just ask. I usually have them on me too. So happy to share the music.
My impression is you get up, you start playing a little bit, you warm up, you play with some play-alongs, you might practice some classical etude stuff, and then before you know it, it's late afternoon and you're kind of heading out somewhere to go sit in. I mean, to sit in with people you know and people you don't know. You're just playing all the time.
Yeah, this quarantine has given me some time to like really think about that. But yes, you're totally correct. For the last like at least decade, I've been pretty much practicing every day. And if I don't have a gig that night, I go out and sit in. And if I do have a gig that night and it's short, I go sit in after or whatever, you know. But I've taken a lot of advice or I've been trying to, not intentionally, but just follow in the footsteps of the people that have inspired me. You know, I have these memories of like every time I would go out on tour with the Motet to New York, we'd play this place called Brooklyn Bowl, and the shows would end early, and I'd always take the train in and go to Smalls. Yeah. And I'm telling you, every freaking time I went there, Roy Hargrove was there. This is a dude who's at the top of the modern trumpet game, and he's hanging at the nightly jam sessions all night, every night, just running tunes and running changes and not being rude, being respectful, listening to other people play. If someone doesn't know the tune, I'd see him do this to a piano player who didn't know the changes, and then after he finishes his solo, he shows him the changes real quick, boom. You know, and not just trumpeters, but another person that comes to mind is Wynton Marsalis. How it's just like, when I look at his discography, it's like some years he released 3 albums, you know, and especially someone like Wynton, he's like a humanitarian as well. And it's like that stuff doesn't happen just randomly. This stuff happens from the amount of dedication they put into their art form, and you can see it, you can hear it. And now that I'm getting up to, you know, coming up on my mid-30s here, I also feel myself wanting to be a good example for the people who are just coming onto the scene. and like let them know like, oh, that's what it takes. You know, you got to put in some time every day and listen to records, and also go out and sit in with people and learn tunes and be cool.
Man, that's worth a toast. Well said.
You got to get that sound effect again. Clink. Yeah. That reminds me of like, I don't know, is it like Howard Stern or any of those radio shows where they had the guy on the sound effects?
Yes. Man, the point I want to stress about that is, yes, just be nice, be a giver, not a taker, and do what you love. I've been on gigs with you, which you're saying they end early. Everyone should know Gabe's early is a different thing than others.
Mm-hmm.
So a gig ending early is 10. And then, oh, wow, okay. And then Gabe's like throwing his horn in his case and dashing out. And he's like, well, I'm trying to make this thing up in outside of town for this, other jam session, or to sit in with another band, do another gig till 1.
Yeah.
When you're on your way to go do that, what is going through your mind?
I mean, there's a number of reasons. I like to look at it as just a holistic, I love music and I love being around it, and I love variety. I love playing all different kinds of music. So maybe we just got done with a big band gig or a Temptations gig or a wedding gig, and I want to go play some funky music, or I want to go play some small group jazz. But also from the other aspect of it, and like I said, I just really enjoy doing this. I couldn't put this much time into it if I didn't really just enjoy it. But there's also an aspect of be seen, be heard, be on the scene, and I don't think of myself as somebody who's like narcissistic in that way and trying to just get something or whatever. So self-absorbed. Mainly, I want to keep being able to do this for a living. And one of the things that's enabled me to do that is to be proficient at my instrument in enough different categories that I can make a living playing gigs most nights. So I gotta, like you brought up earlier, I gotta have my classical stuff together, because I did some shows with Boulder Philharmonic and Colorado Symphony for the first time last year, but also playing like funk music and being able to play some high note trumpet and have a decent tone for small group stuff. If I can have all that together, it's like, cool. I know I don't have to turn down a gig because I can't do something, and I know people will want to call me because they know I can.
Yeah.
And
by the way, you've seen me put up a few times with tips. If you can spare even a couple of bucks, no limit, $1 to $100 to help Gabe. This has been a really tough 3 months. Someone like him who's out there doing it, playing among the people, for the people, and then something like this just shuts it down. And we've all felt it really heavy. And so just paying rent, paying bills, this is our income. This is the way we live. And people might think, well, you're kind of doing that fun little thing. And I hope an interview like this sort of broadens people's minds a little bit and go, to play like Gabe does, I honestly don't believe it's possible to play once a week for 5 years. You just can't do it. This is a sophisticated language that you have to assimilate, music like written notes, but also the trumpet, playing the brass instrument. It's so physical. You have to play it every day. You have to do your calisthenics. It's about strength and flexibility. And someone like Gabe is at the top of his game. And when you hear him on a gig and go, man, how do you do that? The answer is he plays every day and he's thinking about it. Yeah. So how do you keep the motivation going? You just love it?
I do. Honestly, I've been thinking about that a lot during this quarantine, because one of the things I miss most is just like going to the symphony. I was really getting into going to the opera or like ballet. The composer thing has just been really astonishing me lately, the concept of all that. So to answer your question, I think first and foremost, I'm just a music lover.
Yeah.
Like I like to go out, and maybe that pertains to the last question you asked me too, about why do I leave the gig and go to someone else's gig to sit in or just listen. I like being around music. It makes me feel comfortable, but how do I stay motivated during this time? It was finding kind of going back to myself as a young, like, middle schooler and early high school, when I'd like get home from school and just open up my like trumpet etude books, whatever I might have, and just start playing through. And I play for 20 or 30 minutes, and then my chops would get tired and I put it down and come back to it 30 or 40 minutes later. That's mainly what I was doing, you know, between the ages of 12 to 15 or 16. By then I started playing music with people outside of school, but before then it was like you played music at home or you played in band.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had this revelation at the beginning of the quarantine thing, like, I'm just gonna go through an etude book every night. I'll just play through. It'll be fun, you know, drive my neighbors insane, but I'll just go through and play. And like, that's sort of how I got into the wine thing too. I was like, man, what, just sip on this and just play through till I'm done, you know. And like I said, it becomes, especially with like Bach, I was playing a bunch of Bach stuff, and it's just so musical, you know, and it's just arpeggios and like these perfectly written scalular and arpeggiated patterns. And it has direct application to the improvisation thing, but also getting back to just like me and this. And that was sort of how to answer your question, that's sort of how I stayed motivated, at least for the first month. And also, like you brought up earlier, a few weeks into it, when we realized we were going to be in this for a while, there were a couple of online recording possibilities. You know, people needed a little something for this or whatever. And so I was recording a couple tracks here and there. And that was motivation enough to just keep me going, you know?
Yeah. And challenging. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of the spice of life. You're at such a good point. Like classical versus reggae versus funk versus straight ahead jazz versus big band jazz versus salsa. It's all kind of like a different drink. It's like, oh yeah, I feel kind of like wine today. And then go, man, a gin and tonic would be so awesome. I want the bubbles. Yeah. I want the piney high end sort of feeling from it. Or man, I just want a beer. I need a Sapporo beer, you know? And so you kind of can feed your soul and go, man, I want a little of this. I want a little of that. And that's kind of what Sonic Tonic's about, is going, man, everyone's frustrated. Everyone has problems, but everyone also has blessings. So if you think about that and then go, but how can I get my mind right? It's listening to awesome music. Find what you love, put on the headphones, sit down under a tree for 5 or 10 minutes, listen to that, breathe, smile, and I guarantee you're going to feel better, and you're not going to want to get in a fight with somebody. I mean, there's a real peace element to music, and I think we need to help spread the gospel with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know. I'm trying to think if I know anyone who says they don't like music. You know, every now and then there'll be the little, you know, sometimes I'll go in and teach elementary school or middle school, and I try and make that point, do little clinics. Who here doesn't like music? There's always one or two kids who's got to say they hate music, whatever. But for the most part, everybody loves music. It contributes to every facet of life, from going on a long drive to movies, to anything. There's a soundtrack to our lives. There's a soundtrack to every film. It makes life, at least for me, you know. And there's like, is it Sibelius that has that quote, like, music begins where words fail or where words end? You know, I think about that a lot. The inexplicable parts of life are what we write songs about, you know?
Yeah. Or, you know, who is the one that said something about, you know, get rid of all of the art and music to go off and fight war? Then no, we're not going to do that, because what's the point of fighting the war? And that's such a good message, I think, right now, is going, man, the arts now are kind of shut down. Let's support those, because we have to. That's what everyone's home doing. Listening to music, listening to Netflix. If you don't think music's important, play a movie with the sound off and tell me how emotional it gets for you. It won't. So, like, being aware that music is important, but to me and to all of us that are in this business, we chose to do it because it's what we love. So it takes a lot of courage to do that, because we know that it's a tough business. But if you make enough to survive, you are fulfilled as a person, and I think you're a good person. If you have 30 seconds, you can spare a couple of dollars, we're going to push it to Gabe, help him get through this time. He's out and playing a few live gigs now. What does it look like? What are you thinking the next 3 or 4 months are going to be like for you, Gabe?
Well, I've been trying to just take things one day at a time, because it's like the news is so intense right now. It changes so much from day to day that I know what things look like right now. I know that, I'm starting to get to play again with small groups, and the rhythm sections are wearing their masks. And as a horn player, for those of you who don't play an instrument, there was I think it was the Vienna Philharmonic that made a video on how much air is actually coming out of this thing. Don't be afraid to come see us live, because even if I played my loudest note with as much air as possible, I couldn't even blow out a candle. That's how little air is coming out of this thing and how it's dispersed. It's staying well within the range of this 6-foot social distancing radius.
Yeah.
So we're not at risk of spreading it that way. And I'm just trying to be as respectful as I can to adhere to all the social restrictions that have been placed. But places like Nocturne, the Brown Palace Hotel, which I play at occasionally, Dazzle, looks like things are starting to get going there in the same way. They're at 50% capacity. Everything's all spaced out. And I played at Nocturne last week. And man, it was the smallest but most appreciative crowd I think I've ever played for.
Wow.
People were just like, you and I can relate, like when you're playing your heart out and everyone's just talking. The whole crowd is just sitting there having a conversation. But I felt like I'd actually reached some people last week at Nocturne, and I'm excited to get back in there. And I think we all have kind of hit a reset button in a few different ways. And I definitely am going to be grateful for some things I might have never even considered after living my life this way for the past few months. And I feel like I'm looking at things in a new light. And I think some of those folks in the audience were too. It was like, even just, you're talking about a great chef or great food. I did a thing at Nocturne a couple weeks back for a live stream, and they provided us with some food afterwards. And I took one bite and I was like, wait, I've only had my home cooking for 2 months. And this is the first time I'm getting to have a real chef's meal. And it was so amazingly good, because I can cook 3 things. So to actually get to have a real fantastic meal. And I think that going back to what you were saying, I think it relates to the music as well. These people are it's not the same listening to music on a stereo. Hearing live music is something to be appreciated. And I think a lot of people are really grateful right now. You know, some days you're like, wow, this isn't so bad. Some days you're like, how could this be any worse? And it's up and down. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to not only enjoy the art, but enjoy the education that's coming out of this time. Whether we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, or the history of this country, or the history of music, or the history of disease, or politics, whatever it is, it's like, man, we're in a time of learning. The stuff I know now, if I had talked to myself in January, I never thought I would be studying some of the things I've really been spending time getting into this past month, because it's overwhelming. There's so much going on, and maybe that's part of the music's role too, is to let you feel at peace for a moment during all this time.
I'm always such a advocate for musicians and artists who are creating beauty. They're creating, they're not taking. They're putting positivity out there, and you're a classic case of that. You're always out playing, and I'm glad that it's starting to kind of shift now, and you're playing today at the Brown Palace.
Yeah, it's nice to be back out, really, and like I said, the folks I've crossed paths with, while it seems like on a global and a national level, there's so much altercation, polarization, and turmoil, the one-on-one interactions I've had with people in the last few weeks have been like really great, you know. So I feel like people are grateful and want to share the positivity right now.
Gabe, thanks for all your time, and best of luck to you. Keep doing it.